Welcome to another episode of Life Stories with Marty. I'm Marty here in Melbourne, and thank you to our audience here and all over the world. And on this episode, we have a former British soldier and a former Irish soldier having a chat. Ves Campion is my guest host. He's up in the studio up on Moral Injury International, our partners. And also, I have our special guest, Richard Hilton, and which is part of the What Makes the Difference in the UK. And boy, is this a story. So may I start off by saying that I would ask all the audience that I want to put a trigger warning on this. We're touching into subjects that may upset or trigger something in someone. So please, if you do, switch off and get some professional chat on this. Okay, so let's cross over. We're going to cross over to up to Sydney with Ves, and then to a special guest over in Bristol, Rich. So let's cross over and chat with the guys. Ves, lovely to join you from Sydney. And Rich, our special guest over in the UK. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Marty.
Now, because it's life stories of that, and I've got one ex-Irish soldier, and I've got one ex-British soldier, and then you have me. So either ways, but I want to start off with Rich, and Ves will jump in at appropriate. And I just want to start off is for people, you were born in Bristol. So tell us a bit about your upbringing, and then if you can dovetail into your school growing up, a bit maybe about your parents, and then if you can dovetail again into how you started in the army, and we take over from there. So it's over to you.
Yes. So I was brought up in a little village just north of Bristol, and so we were quite heavily involved in dealing with in the agricultural sector. So look after cattle, doing hay baling, haymaking, doing straw baling and all that sort of stuff. So I had an uncle who had stables, and he actually served himself as a conscript back in 1956. So he was due to go out to the sewers, but obviously never went out there. So yeah, we had quite rural life, living about a mile away from the nearest major town or so. And yeah, so yeah, I believe my dad was going to join the King's Royal Rifle Corps at the time, but he wasn't able to, so he was invalided out due to asthma. My dad ended up doing things like lorry driving and stuff like that. And my mum was a nurse, a neurology, I think. Then she finished that to look after us growing up, and then she was in the post office doing the post rounds.
And so tell us a little bit about your schoolhood, growing up in school in England, as in Bristol.
Yeah, not a lot to say really. Not very academic. Later, so around about 2011, I was later diagnosed with dyscalculia.
Yep.
Which is having trouble with maths and numbers and all that sort of stuff. So a bit like dyscalculia, dyslexia with words, but with numbers, sort of thing.
Oh, I think I'm like that myself still to this day.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah, and then I joined the army. And the only reason why I really did, I suppose, was my dad gave me the belief is that all I was good for growing up from a young age was either going in prison or going in the army. So growing up from a very young age, I really didn't believe I had much option. And then obviously joined up around about 93. And I don't know about if you ever come across this, Ves, is when you go to recruiter that you say, right, I'd like to go for this trade, say like a dog handler or a medic, and then the recruiter goes, "Oh yeah, but you can do that in your battalion in your unit." Do you ever come across that?
I know you should have left my mic on. Yeah, so yeah, when we passed out, we had to do a further what's called a 3-star course. So we did our 16 weeks training, recruit training. And then it was during the next set of training that you get a chance to request to go into a certain division, whether tank or whatever. I ended up in artillery, but it was no guarantee that you would get the spot that you asked for. But you put in where you would like to go, and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how it works over in the UK, or used to, was the recruiter would ultimately try and get you to their unit because they would get paid, they get a bit of a bounty for that. And so by hook or crook, they would lie to you saying, "Oh yeah, you can be a medic, you can be a dog handler, you can be this trade or that trade," which is pretty underhanded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I eventually joined the Grenadier Guards on the promise of being like a dog handler and stuff. So that was then down at Pirbright. So that was 10 weeks. So they had what was then called the Common Military Syllabus, basic training, and they had just started opening up Catterick for the phase 2 infantry training, which was about 16 weeks or so.
And Ridge, which just going into what you're saying there is, I want to touch a bit now that we've got past that, is like when you went into the army, you expected, and forgive me if I'm wrong, you expected something. You did want to go into the army. You were totally when you committed to it, but then I think this is a kind of a half life story, a half moral injury show. But you suffered quite a bit in the army, and can you give us a little bit on that for our listeners, please?
Yeah. So get to battalion, and being a junior person, there was you call it a CROW, which stands for Conscript Recruit of War.
Wow.
Basically, you're given all the shit jobs. You were there's a lot of bullying going on as well. So even though you see all these people in dressed up in tunics back then, talking to other people who served at the same time as me, said the battalion was really bad. So bad leadership, bad management. There's a lot of abuse going on. People come into your room at night, beating you up. You know, they'd be pissed themselves. There'd be about 5 or 6 guys jumping all over the top of you. And that sort of thing was quite a regular basis.
And on top of that is also is, yeah, what you're talking about there is like at one stage, even with your own battalion, you were almost, someone tried to kill you.
Yeah, so that was, I can't remember what it was over now, but this is when we were out in Ballykinler.
Mm.
And so we're 2-year tour out in Ballykinler, and as I don't remember what it was over, but yeah, he took a knife and he's like trying to kill me with it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So
and then and got to serve alongside these people day in, day out. And
yeah, I was just thinking, Rich, that very few of the people that I served with were real soldiers. They weren't soldiers that wanted to join the army. They just had no other choice, nothing else, no work to do, and decided to join. So there probably would have been 1 or 2 alpha males, and the rest of us were just, there trying to survive, And so I get it 100% when you say that there was a constant pressure of hierarchy over you the whole time. Absolutely soul destroying some days.
It can be. Really, we did, because guards officers tend to do their own thing. You don't really see them. So you don't have that kind of leadership or management with them. So it's left down to the NCOs. And if they can't be bothered, or they're not interested, or parts of that group who's going through that bullying and harassment, then you don't really stand a chance. So everybody kind of is there, as you say, surviving as best they can.
Yeah, we did our recruit training at the end of summer. October, it was October 1st in 1981. And so we got into our winter months, and you know, the NCOs would make us stand to attention for like 20 minutes at a time, freezing cold. You know, your fingers would be stuck to the rifle.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sorry, I don't want to hijack your story here, but at the time, 1981 was the first ever female regiment that was being trained. So they were getting harsh training. They had to be 100% spectacular, and because we were training the next square over them, you know, the NCOs would drill us to near death almost some days, just so that we didn't look bad on our side.
Well, this is how bad it used to be. I was chatting to this lady, and her dad was in the army. So this going back to around back 1920s, 30s. Anyway, he was a young man, and he wasn't able to do a complete 30-inch pace. So he was too short.
Oh.
So he was sent off to see a surgeon, and a surgeon actually cut him open and messed around with his ligaments and tendons and all that, just opened him up, stitched him back up. The surgeon gave him like 6 weeks, 2 months sick, light duties. He went in front of that sergeant major at the time, and the sergeant major ripped up, and he had him up and down the square getting drills. That was back then in the 20s, 30s. And then later on is a friend of mine who joined probably in the 60s. He was in the Navy, and he was doing swimming, and one of the PTIs got a bit splashed with water, and he called them all out, as you say, freezing cold day in the middle of winter, and he had them all on parade, and there was only one person who said he couldn't tell who splashed the bloke, and he was just like, yeah, it was me, just so anybody finished punishment.
Yeah.
You wonder why that happens, but going to, and both of you guys, I could tell, like, what was, and I'm going to ask both of you the same question, and Ves, if you could start, is what was your highlight of joining the army, and what was your low life in the army?
The highlight was when we were on the ranges firing weapons. It was really, for me, so powerful. That's what we love to do. That's, you know, we firing the weapons, even though I almost shot half my platoon. That's another story for another time, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I was firing a mag on a tripod. Long story. Anyway, so yeah, hand grenades, all the artillery weapons that we trained, you know, I loved all that side of it, but then hated everything else around it. Everything from, you know, painting rocks. And we did, you know, that's the crap that went with it all. And joining in, like you said, Rich, you're a new recruit. You're the lowest of the low, 17 years of age in front of guys that are in there in their 30s that are NCOs. And you're lighting their fires, and you're polishing their boots, and oh man. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast, Marty?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, sorry, no fucking swearing on this. There you go. That's
yeah. So I know this is all about you, Rich, but I'm fine. I'm getting a lot of therapy out of this right now.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think the whole...
You're not the only one.
And I know, sorry, Rich, is like with you guys, and this is like three guys sitting around talking, is when Ves is talking there, and it triggers it in my head, is sometimes you don't bring out stuff, and I keep saying this, men are stupid, but once they get to know someone, we should talk about this. But Rich, going back to, I just want to, it kind of fascinates me because you're both on the opposite side, as you would say, at that time, but you're still on the same page, is when you served in Northern Ireland, and I've read your stuff, and the abuse continued there. Can you tell us a bit about that, please?
Well, I was going to say a bit about Ves is, you know what you said, a bit of therapy is you're not the only person who's been in that same boat, and there's that recognition, isn't it? So you go, oh, well, yeah, somebody else has been through not the same or similar experiences, and so you're not kind of left alone.
Yeah.
Even though no matter how shitty it has been.
No, can you give us a little bit when you served in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so part of that was quite good. So we'd be in the outstations down to Warren Point, Besbrook Mill, and those sort of places around Lurgan, doing patrol of the city or those streets. So yeah, one quite amusing sort of part on one winter. So around Warren Point it was, I think. So it'd been snowing quite heavy, and there was young kids pelting us with snowballs. Anyway, there's this old boy.
I would have
So the kids always stop doing that. Yeah. So this old boy, he said, leave those blokes alone. They're just doing their job." So he ended up being the target of these kids' ire, as it were.
And did you ever feel in Northern Ireland, just for my listeners, did you ever feel when you were there, was there, I don't have to say this, but I'm just going to spit it out, did you feel guilt when you seen these children? Did you, not your political, I'm asking your political,
No.
Did you feel any guilt, or did you see something that you thought shouldn't have happened?
No. So I think that was kids just being kids, isn't it, really? When we were over there, so it was kind of so there's 96, 98, so that's kind of like peace process on and off. The only bit of drama there really was Stephen Rostrick, who got murdered. He's artillery blast bombardier, and he got murdered by the 50 cal sniper. So that's probably the worst thing that happened on the tour I can recall. Aside from that, apart from the people I was working with, not many problems from the local population.
And do you think that? Go ahead, please.
Do you think that the NCOs? I felt that the NCOs had to be cruel, or they wouldn't be respected by other NCOs, or felt like they would get walked over. Like it felt like some of the NCOs were not that bad blokes, but they just had to be shit because that was their job.
I think it depends on the individual.
Yeah.
So there's one guy, Chris, who was, and there's another bloke called Jim, and they were sort of people you aspire to be. You know, they were fit, they were really good in their role. But there's a lot of others who you just like, how did you get where you are?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
true.
So that leads me to the question, because Rich, that you do with the lovely Ali, the podcast, the lovely woman, and you do the podcast, What Makes a Difference. What made you want to go in with all the bullying, everything you went to the army, the bullying and people down it? What made you want to go into start podcasts with non-profit? What drove you to that? And if I can just dovetail into that, what was your worst down moment? And I know, and I want you to go into that about when you had a breakdown. So I want to dovetail into that. That's all right.
So why we started What Makes a Difference is my stupid idea, because we went into this competition to have a podcast, and so Ali and I were volunteering with a armed forces mental health charity, doing therapy and coaching. And for a lot of people, it's all reactive. There's nothing proactive really within the charity sector. Very few organisations are proactive to sort of things out before you get there, and people don't really know what they don't know until they're in crisis points. So we set this podcast up, What Makes a Difference, originally called Rethinking Trauma and Transition, was to give people a way of understanding themselves when they're going through the transition process, using really simple terms of what it means to go understand what anxiety is, what depression is, you know, what leaving the armed forces can be like for some people, that kind of thing. Just explain things in simple terms. And through that came What Makes a Difference, a non-profit. So we're a community interest company, and we didn't want to be a charity. So that means trustees, and these trustees may take you off the direction you don't want to go in. So after leaving the army for the second time, I then was looking to get in the oil and gas industry. So I was doing offshore courses and all that sort of stuff, but I couldn't get any work in there. And then so I was doing some contracting on some railways. Got fired from there, and then pretty much up until 2000. So this back in 2013, up until about 2016, that was pretty much constantly in and out of work because I wasn't in the right mental place to have a full-time kind of steady job. I didn't know how to fit into society and all that sort of good stuff, and that's what we kind of deal with. Then I worked for a large national electrical transmission company. So that was there for 5 years, and it probably was there for 3 years too long. And during that time, I had a bit of a breakdown. So yeah, and that was stressed the job. I knew what the job was, but didn't know how to fit into teams. So they really hadn't employed anybody as a direct route from outside of the industry into that organization for about 40 years.
Did you think, Rich, that was a transition from the army into, I suppose, public, as in doing what you're doing? Would that have had any effect on you?
Can you repeat the question, please, Martin?
Yeah, did you find transitioning from the army and then what you were talking about going into the social or the normal life, did that affect you?
Yeah, it's been there's not
Sorry, I
going
don't
on.
know if I explained that right, but
Yeah, that's okay. I think that has been quite difficult. So there's a lot going on in the background. So left an abusive relationship. I had my own home repossessed, and that sort of thing was going on. Plus, there's other bits and bobs. So yeah, that all added piled on, and I wasn't able to secure a good job. I wasn't able to get any decent work or anything like that. So again, that piles on the pressure of having to pay bills, applying for work, telling the bank to go, look, just repossess the house, just take it. Yeah, lost all the savings and that sort of stuff. So yeah, and then it's kind of right rebuilding myself up really from there. And then when I was working for the National Electrical Transmission Company, yeah, I had a breakdown and then. So all this stuff kind of piled up together in the winter. And the boss that I had at the time, there was one chap who he was in the RAF, and to come on site, if you were smelling of alcohol or you've been under the influence of any sort of illicit substances, that's you off site straight away. This guy really good at his job, really knew it inside out. He'd only been there a bit longer than me, but he would come on site quite regularly smelling the booze. So some occasions you have to drive at least an hour to get to a site. And these two, so the team leader and the manager were told by like the union rep, they were told by the likes of other members of staff that this chap was smelling of alcohol. Their solution was to then, right, here's some breathalyzers. He can take them before he comes out. It wasn't until they went on a drugs and alcohol race course they realized how much shit they were in, because this dude was basically under the influence of alcohol. And if he got caught in an accident, whatever else, they'd be right in the poo. So then this lad got suspended for 6 weeks. I don't know what happened in between then. So he left under whatever circumstances, I don't know. And then the manager said to me at the later date is, I'm never ever going to hire anybody from the forces again. So then you're not psychologically safe with this individual. You don't know how you fit in with the job, so it all piles up. And so when I did have a breakdown, and he asked me to drive from my home up to a site which is an hour away, to be there for 8, 9 in the morning. And he then turns up late, has a cigarette, has a coffee, So that's about 11 o'clock before he even decides to have a chat with me. What I should have really done was just drive straight home and gone home.
And Rich,
So-
just for my listeners, because I'm intrigued what you're saying. How did you know you were having a breakdown? What was the signs?
Basically, I just kind of yeah. Put my tablet on a pillar. That fell on the floor. My team leader came to had a word with me, and I just walked off. And I just sat somewhere outside and cold for probably about 2-3 hours.
Mm.
Eventually came inside and just sat there, just shut down, nothing going on. And then went from there really. So took a month off.
Wow. Can I bring you in, please, Ves? Because I know you're listening. I can see you listening intensely. Can I bring you in on this conversation, please?
Yeah, sure. I think that to get from where you were to where you are now, there's a power of strength there for yourself, but also a teaching for other people that are going to go through this or going through this now and are going to go through it. I think there's a value to it, and it just takes so much strength and courage to make that one extra step after step after step, to make it through all the crap that you get with it. We all deal with crap, but some people deal with other more crap than others. And hats off to you, Rich.
Yeah,
well done.
cheers. What I would say to that though is, whatever crap you're going through, it's not competition. It's not the trauma Olympics. So your crap is your crap, and it doesn't matter if somebody else, has been, the worst things imaginable happened to them. That's their crap to deal with. And as I say, whatever you're dealing with is your problems, your issues, and whatever they're dealing with, and it's not a comparison between the two.
No. Yeah.
And guys, can I throw out something there that's just talking about, obviously, for disclosure, I'm the founder of Life Stories with Marty, and co-founder along with Leo Quinlan, Dr. Jensen, and our past and lovely friend Michael Lyons, rest in peace, which is a good friend of all of ours, especially Ves. Like to say is, I would like to invite you two guys back, because I'm running out of time, but I would like to invite you two back on Moral Injury podcast, because
Sure.
I think you've got a lot more to offer, both of you. But before we go, I want to ask you one question, and I'm going to ask, at your deepest times, Rich, and with the abuse and with the UK Army or British Army and everything you went through, like I'm just branching on my notes here now, and serving in Northern Ireland, everything is. Did you ever think about just it's over, as in thinking about suicide?
Oh yeah, done that plenty of times.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
So I don't know if you come across the term passive suicidality, passive suicide.
No.
It's so basically is people who drink themselves to death, or it could be
Correct. I do.
Yeah. So self-harming. One of the things I was doing was walking out to slow-moving traffic.
Yep.
And going, some friends would go, "Oi, what are you doing?" I go, well, they'll stop, won't they? You know what I mean? And at one point I did attempt to hang myself. So yeah.
And can I know what you're saying, Rich, and if I just can say there is, I keep saying this all the time, and I can prove this, but there's two different types of suicide. Well, there's many different types you can do, but I'm saying two is There's one that just does it and impulsively, or they're fed up with life and do it. And then there's other people that drink themselves to death or use drugs to death and just give up on themselves, which is another form of suicide. But what I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to go into Ves in a sec, but what drove you to that? And I'm not going to answer your question. Do you feel you were worthless, or why did you do it? I think about it.
Yeah, so I believe. Well, I actually went through with it, so I hanged myself. And that was because I didn't believe I had any options. I had no money coming in. So council tax came through, and they're like, "We're going to take you to court. You know, there's all this extra money coming in that I don't have. All these other bills coming in. How do I pay? I don't know." So that's the only option he got, really.
Desperation.
Yeah. So there was somebody who I was seeing, and she was quite into the woo-woo stuff, but she also very, very good hypnotherapist and various other kinds of counselling or talk therapists. So what she said to me was, through like the woo-woo kind of thing, is if you know people who suicide themselves, they got to repeat this life again. And as I always had that round my neck, thinking, do I really want to put myself through this again? Probably not.
Well.
So if you take it from the spiritual aspect or that kind of thing, then that's why I didn't do it.
Well, listen, I just wonder, but I want to bring in Ves, and then we've got about 10 minutes to wrap up the show, guys. But this is fascinating, and I think Ves I can see the expression on his face. This is fascinating for us guys to be able to talk about it. And I think you'd all agree, which I say on every podcast, men are stupid. They keep things hidden inside themselves. And I believe, like, women are smarter because they'll tell you. And annoying, but they'll tell you. So, Ves, can I bring you in there as we're talking, please? And a little bit on your story.
Well, I think I lived pretty much a charmed life. I was helped a lot. I had a lot of help from people along the way. My army life got cut short when we were out training one day, full pack, rifles, a whole lot, and I suffered a collapsed lung. And I gotta say, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though it happened 4 times, and they eventually operated on me. But yeah, I was put on light duties. I wasn't allowed to go overseas like the rest of the lads were going over and doing UN trips. I was stuck in the kitchen washing dishes and peeling potatoes. So I made that work for me. But after 6 years, I knew I was the bottom of the heap. My army life was going nowhere. You had to die before you become an NCO. Before you get a chance to become an NCO. And I was at the bottom of 30 guys ahead of me. So I knew there was no future for me. But yeah, look, all I gotta say is that I'm very lucky that I left when I left. I got my collapsed lung. I didn't stay in the army. I then went to London and met an Australian wife and a woman, and we came to Australia. And now I've got 2 teenage daughters. I wouldn't, if that collapsed lung had never happened, I'd still be in the army. Or dead.
You do, and as I said, you do a lot for the Irish community up in Sydney, as I said on the intro. But I'm going to ask you the same question: did you ever go through a depth in your life where you just thought it would be over?
Yeah, for sure.
Have you ever thought about suicide?
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the army. Because there's a lot of mental shit that you get put through. There's a lot of mental shit, and I often wondered about, we'll say, the NCOs that put you through that. How they feel now? Like, there's some people that were shit to me back in the day now want to be friends on Facebook, and you go, what the fuck? Why? Like, and I feel nothing. You feel nothing for them, other than pity. And, you look at them now and you go, you guys were shit back then.
Yeah.
And now you want to be friends, like, so, fuck it.
Yeah. And what kept you from not continuing with taking?
Yeah. I reckon I wasn't brave enough like you, Rich, to go that far. I wasn't, chicken shit, I suppose. I don't know.
I didn't know what else to do with my life, Ves, tell you. That's the honest truth.
Yeah.
Oh, look, and you know what, though? I got to say this, guys, is because you obviously know my family history, but to suicide people think is a chicken way out, what you were saying, but suicide is probably one of the most bravest things. I don't encourage it. I tried it myself at 16, but thank God. But what I'm saying is, by able to talk about it is very important. And guys, I've got to finish up the show, but can I please, as I just said earlier, love to have you two back on the Moral Injury. I know Bess is going to be come back on as my co-host on a lot of shows, and he gets it. But your honesty and your openness, that's what a lot of people, just my little 5 bob or 2 bob, as it says, talking to you guys it's therapy within itself for people, because we're not unique. All 3 of us that we're talking now, there's people out there that can relate to each one of our stories. And you know what? I just ask people to speak out. So if I can ask Rich to send out a message, and I'll ask Ves if he can send out a message as we close up the show, what would you say to other people? And that's over to you, Rich.
If you can say to someone, write it down. Maybe that could be the first point of disclosure to yourself. Until you actually read those words, then it's all just in your mind, and it may not really happen.
How would you ask people to, just a follow-up there, how do people deal with it? And I'm going, it runs in everything from army to police to nurses to medical, all of that, doctors, nurses. I'm asking you from your perspective what you went through, and I'm going to follow up the same question to finish with Ves.
Sorry, is it my turn? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
This tea is strong. Look, I think that we are old now. Like we when we were young, 17. I was 17, early 20s, when I was going through all this stuff, and people that might be looking at this thinking that we didn't. We took one step at a time, one tiny bit a step at a time, and you just eat away at it, because you're gonna have a long life. You have to have a long life, and giving up is not the answer for anybody. And you just gotta make those tiny little steps, one step at a time, every step of the way, and keep going and keep going and keep fucking going.
Well, all I can say, guys, is it's been a pleasure to have you on, both of you, and your ambassadors for being honest, I would use the word. So listen, thank you guys, and thank you to our listeners here in Australia and all over the world, and go to Moral Injury International and Life Stories to follow up with more, and with this podcast, video and audio. Thank you guys. Ves, a pleasure, my friend. I'll see you soon.
Yep.
Rich, thank you so much.
Cheers, Marty. Thanks for having me on.